We'll start talking about this new topic, responsibility in Islam, and we'll talk about the moral agency. And the screen will change in a minute and we'll be starting. And there is a little problem in one of the Facebook Live, so I'm trying to resolve that matter. But it won't be possible, so we'll just go ahead with the normal program. Thank you very much for joining, and today we'll be talking about the next topic, responsibility in Islam and moral agency. If you have followed this program in last time, it was all about how the religious school of thoughts and fiqh school of thoughts have emerged, and so now we'll continue how that translate into a moral agency in Fethullah Gulen's thinking, or how Fethullah Gulen thinks this is moral agency. So we'll be talking about a number of issues. In order to explain moral agency in a more precise manner, there needs to be an elaboration of the concepts, such as, human beings being vicegerent on earth, and the human faculties that makes this vicegerency possible, the ruh, the spirit, and aql, the reason, and WIJDAN, the conscience, and NAFS, the id. And of course, at the end of this conversation, we'll have a small talk about compatibility and determinism, whether having a fate written beforehand is contradicting with the moral responsibility issues. So if we were to start with the moral agency, we have to go back to what Islam and vicegerency issues are, because vicegerency comes because of a verse in Baqarah, where Allah, when according to Surah Baqarah, verse number 30, when he said, when your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent, a Khalifa on earth, they said, will you place there one that will cause corruption and shed blood, while we glorify you with your praise and extol your holiness? And God answered that, verily I know what you don't know. So in here there is a couple of issues. First of all, the word Khalifa, now I know everyone that knows this word as a political word, but the word Khalifa actually refers to a number of issues and translates to a number of issues. As the angels answer, will you create something that will cause corruption and shed blood? Because they are referring to a historical incident. Before human beings, there was a creation, a conscious creation on earth that create corruption and shed a lot of blood, and God removed them from earth. And now when he said, I will create a vicegerent, a Khalifa, a successor, the angels first thought that a successor to the previous one, the ones that cause corruption and bloodshed. But for that reason, Islamic scholars debate whether this is a successor to the previous creation of God in earth, or whether this is a creation that will succeed God, or that will be a deputy of God on earth. So most of scholars, like Fethullah Gulen including, think their teachings based on human beings are vicegerents on earth, meaning that they are representing God on earth rather than representing the previous creation on earth. But according to Gulen, of course, which is our topic, which is my PhD thesis, that's why we are talking about Gulen. This is because there are some faculties, there are some capacities that are given to human beings, which make them morally responsible, which we mentioned in previous conversations as well. But these are, for instance, mainly the existence of free will that humans have, and as well as some other qualities like aql, the reason, وجدان, the conscious, and the nafs, the id. These faculties are entrusted to human beings by God and placed within their ruh, which we'll be talking about it as well. And human beings, because of these faculties and because of these capacities, they can understand and they are responsible to act morally responsible. So if you were to go through, like in an order, we are mainly talking about, because human beings have a cerebral body, and like what we call ruh, but the ruh involves akal, reasoning, conscious, id. They are all wrapped in the spirit ruh. So we'll start talking about the spirit ruh and what it means. So Gulen recognized the spiritual element in human beings as well as a physical element. It's almost like a pilot sits in our mechanical body, the existing material body that drives the body itself. So when someone dies, actually that spirit leaves the body. So this is pretty much same in almost all beliefs or all other philosophies as well. But Gulen also assumes that the spirit is there in all living beings, but human spirit has slightly more capacity and different faculties that which allows them to be responsible. And the first of them is the reason, and the second of them is وجدان. I've talked already about that. And the third of them is nafs. So the composition of that is ruh, because I said as ruh is a different thing as well, because ruh may have some other components that we may not know about, because we have very little knowledge about ruh. And ruh has like 3 dimensions, and the first 2 dimensions are mainly about about being breathed. So there is a connection. It has been breathed to human beings. So it is almost an extension of God. It is the thing that keeps body going, and it is also what we call that urges the body to have needs and to eat, to survive, what we call the animal spirit of the human being. So if we were to start with the reason, akal is, what we talk is about mainly the ability to reason, and it develops in a human being once the person reaches the puberty. But the akal has its own levels, and it can be, in majority of the cases, what we assume that as natural reason develops in human beings in the first level of reasoning, develops in human beings at the age of 12, 13, 14, when they are capable enough to understand and differentiate between good and bad, and harm and benefit. At least most of Muslim scholars think in this way. Reason can come to people even earlier, but it doesn't make them necessarily morally responsible if their nafs, the ego, has not developed alongside with it, which means like they haven't acquired the sexual desires and animal appetites with them. So the second level of the akal, which in next level generally, which is perceived as a maturity, is is once people develop their reasoning power into a reason of evidence, which means they don't not only understand harm and benefit, or rules or regulations, or good and bad, they also understand the reason behind it. So let's say a 12-year-old understands that he has to stop in red light and pass in green, and let's say once he develops in time and takes part in society and see or read about it, he understands that the meaning of traffic rules and how it avoids save lives and avoids chaos and accidents. So this is the second level, a bit more experienced reasoning. And the third level is experimental reason, which means people who can understand not only rules and the reasons behind it, they can also connect with every incident, with the cosmological existence, or with the let's say it's basically about Islamic. I'm trying to make it more relatable, but it's like understanding every rule that has been put by God, and their meanings and their relation with the wider life. So this is the first faculty that we're going to talk as part of ruh, the reason, and 3 different levels. One person have to be a person have to be at least in what we call aql fitri, in natural reason level, to be morally responsible. But it's not only that, it's also what we call conscious, the wijdan. Gülen used wijdan as a mechanism rather than a faculty itself, and it has, of course, a lot of components according to Gülen, but not all of them are related to our topic. So I just will go through some of the components that are very, very relevant in decision making. So it is very important to know what they are and how they make us morally responsible. So the first one would be the willpower, irade. Maybe this is the most important one, because eventually irade is the ability to choose between 2 decisions. And as we discussed in the previous lecture, that irade is given to human beings as an extension of God's own greater irade, greater capacity to make the decision for people. But we only believe that we can only make the decisions, not to create the outcomes. But still, because we make the decisions, we become responsible. So according to Gülen, it's a mechanism within the wijdan, within the conscience, that allows us to make an inclination towards either decision. So that decision emerges in different places. For instance, another tool in that wijdan box, or in the conscious box, is that what we call spiritual intellect, fuad, which is, according to Gülen, a polished mirror which reflects the divine attributes and representations of God, which basically is a connection point to God and His will. So let's say there is a natural ontological inclination towards goodness and away from the bad. That's basically because all human beings are born with a connection towards God through their fuad, through their spiritual intellect. So when they are presented a case, they can pretty much understand what is the right decision in there. They may not want to do that because it may not be in their financial benefit or something, but they definitely can understand what is good for them. And that is because what we call a part of the conscious has a connection with God, unless it has been killed by misuse and constant abuse, then in that case a conscious may not be very, very active, very, very, let's say, sending strong signals, but yet it is there in the beginning. So another part is what we call his, sensations or feelings. This may be in 2 parts. Yes, like 5 external senses like sight, touch, hearing, smell, and taste, but also some others like imagination, will, conception, conceptualization, manipulation, understanding, supposition, and recollection. All this is the feelings that embodied or find their place to operate in the wijdan, help us to make decisions as well. Generally, these parts, the ones that encourage us to go towards the goodness. And the fourth one is the consciousness, the zihin. This is like a memory in a computer. It's memory, meaning, like, for instance, if you do face a moral challenge and make a decision, good or bad, it leaves you with a good conscious or a good feeling and bad feeling, and that it stores in your mind. If you think daily about your actions and your choices and the outcomes, the way they make you feel, your zihin, your consciousness grows stronger. So when you come a similar decision, you make a quicker decision because you have a previous experience about that. but that is, like that's the fourth part. So if we just go back to this one last time, all four of them together. Yeah. Yeah, so it is like a once you have came across in a moral dilemma, you have this akal so far to think, to calculate, to understand, and you have vijdan, the conscious so far, to connect with your God and draw inspiration from that and keep that logs in your mind, become a better person and someone who makes the moral choice all the time quicker. But there is this third part, what we call the id nafs. The reason I translated nafs as id is because essentially nafs is, as it is in natural form, it's all about survival, it's all about hunger, it's all about staying alive, it's all about animal urges in untamed, worked way, or untamed or uneducated way. So that's why I translate it as Freud's id, because it is like almost alter ego. It starts off from those animal urges. It's not concerned with whether it is moral or not. It's all about greed and getting what he needs or she needs to survive. But of course, it's apart from this, ill grudges and everything, it's a very important part of Islamic philosophy, because it's also the most important part that makes human beings morally responsible. If someone doesn't have those tendencies, they are not really making a moral choice, they are just following the thing. So according to most of scholars, including Rumi and others, the nafs can be tamed and should be tamed, of course, that's the idea. Otherwise, the basic part of nafs, the way it appears in our life, is what we call as evil commanding nafs. Most of the time, almost all of the time, because it's not concerned with the morality, laws, ethics, and anything else. It's basically giving us the choice that will only work for us, would work for us, but not necessarily the moral one. So assuming that in this first level that our nafs is always giving us the bad advice, we have to always check it with the conscious and our reason to make sure that it's not unethical or harming others. Is understanding that nafs ammara, the nafs, the that gives us the bad advice all the time. We have to be suspicious about the inspiration we get from the nafs. Once we do this, it takes us to second level, the self-condemning nafs, which means that if we are aware that the nafs is always giving us not necessarily the best inspiration, but let's say a bit dangerous and unprocessed inspiration, then we try to be suspicious about it and try to be careful about it, especially put some measures in place to not to please it all the time, like riyazat, keeping austerity, keeping simple, managing our expectations and our demands from life. Then it becomes the second level, the self-condemning nafs, where the person is self-criticizing. At this level is nafs. So it takes us to third level with this, and alongside with it, when the person does more thinking, more deliberation, increases reasoning and increases conscious powers and become a more conscious person, then the nafs become in its third level become receiving inspiration, so nafs mulhama. And then the way it goes and continue the training, and the more it becomes tamed with the ethics and morality, it becomes nafs at rest, where in this fourth level the person is acting morally and obeying the moral laws to attain the content with the life. So he feels more peaceful with the nafs and with his or her actions. He doesn't feel left out. He feels, consciously doing the right thing as the best choice and best outcome. And it takes, the person to the next level, the nafs well pleased, meaning whatever is given, or provided by God or not provided, good or bad. He can see the divine wisdom behind that and develops from there. And then it becomes a nafs that pleases God, according to Sufi thinkers. And final level of it is, of course, the perfected nafs. This is mainly a description to explain the prophets and their relationship, or the level of nafs. It's you know, it doesn't make mistakes. It has the what we call sidq and emanat, the full truthfulness and full trustworthiness. So that brings us the freedom and compatibility issues. So far we talked about these mechanisms that, you know, in one way we are receiving overall an inspiration from our VIJDAN, our consciousness. That's mainly good inspiration, and in another way we are receiving a bad inspiration from our nafs, an animal urge to greed to get everything, and we have our reason. We reason in one way or another, and we try to make a good decision out of it. But eventually it comes to a point where we make a choice by part of our VIJDAN, the irade, our free choice. But to be able to make this choice, we have to be also free in terms of externally free. We shouldn't be a slave. We shouldn't be constrained by other forceful measures, which annuls the moral responsibility. But even when we are free and we make those decisions, Islamic thinking, as well as, you know, like some other philosophies, question whether there is a real freedom, because everything we have done is preordained, pre-written in destiny. How it can be compatible that what we are doing is known by God, and also we are responsible for that. So we have talked about this issue last time as well, but we will just mention that, first of all, you know, external freedom is important to become more responsible. Once a person commits or makes a decision, the creation of that decision, that action, that outcome of that action is entirely by God. So that's where we say He creates the action, we just make an inclination, but we become responsible. It's like a child you're holding on your arm says that I want to go out, and you take the child out, and the child then gets cold and blames you for getting cold, although you did the action, but it was the child's will to do that. So that is pretty much the end of this week's conversation. Next week, hopefully, I will try to talk more about other issues. But before I go to next week's topic, there is a couple of more environmental issues that we have ignored, because it's not necessarily human beings and his internal mechanism. But as I said, one can develop his reasoning powers, he can tame his nafs, he can strengthen his conscious and wijdan and become a better person. This doesn't mean the end of moral responsibility in Islam, because according to Gulen and other scholars, there is the external temptations, the society, the peer pressure, the shaitan and his deceptions, and constant trials and tribulations that people are presented with, these external pressures, although they want to do the right thing, which may not seem very feasible for them, which may be very hard at times. So the moral responsibility, the debate always continues almost forever. And so next week we'll talk about development of moral agent. I have already talked a little bit about the development of moral agent. We've talked about the wijdan, we've talked about the nafs and its stages, we've talked about reasoning and its stages. But how does it work? How one can develop himself actually, you know, according to Gulen specifically. But so far, that's it. What do you think so far? Would you agree with what you have heard? Do you have any comments? Did I miss any part? I'm trying to keep this conversation in 30 minutes, but there is no reason why we can't continue this conversation in below sections, especially in, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube. It will be very beneficial if you like it or comment it if you disagree with it. And if you want to, of course, support these activities, I'm doing these videos via the support that I get from Patreon, and you can find the links on the screen. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be reading your comments as soon as I finish the program. See you next week, and where we will discuss development of moral agent. Once again, thank you very much.